Raptors is here. Leafs, this is obviously the Canadian list. And look at the positive words that you can see. You're great, you're amazing, you're beautiful. Now, let's compare that to the American word cloud. And we can see we had to blur a lot of the words out, first of all. Also, more instances of negative words like hate, hell, annoying, and bored. We're joined now by one of the authors of the study. Daniel Schmitka is a linguist at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario. He joins us from our Toronto newsroom. So Daniel, when you and your colleague first set out to study Twitter use from different places, it was England and Scotland, and there, describe what you saw in terms of a different way people used some words.
Yes, that's right. So I'm a linguist by training, so I was interested in looking at how different words are used, dialectal differences, and we found, for example, lots of interesting things like the fact that Scottish people use the word "we" a lot more than English people do, and English people use the word "small" for that meaning, and this was all very nice. So we decided to look at the same thing with Canada and the US. So we looked at two different border regions. For the US and Canada, we looked at Vancouver and Seattle, and also the Detroit, Toronto area. And what we found weren't really linguistic phenomena as such, but we found striking cultural and social differences in the language that people use.
And so we hinted at these already, but describe for me what these differences were and why they were striking.
The differences were really in the emotional connotations of the tweets, or the words that we used in the tweets. So Canadians seem to be very buoyant, upbeat, polite. They use words like amazing, great, and fantastic, and wow. On the other hand, our US brothers and sisters, they tended to be more irritable and negative, and there was lots of profanity there.
You know, of course, this plays to the stereotype, or at least the stereotype many of us in Canada cherish. But you see this a bit as an outsider. You're British. Before you saw the results of the study, would you have drawn, just from your anecdotal experience, the same kinds of conclusions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had been prepared for what is, the Canadian air of moral superiority, that stereotype, and I think that this study certainly speaks to that. It could be used by Canadians to buttress that idea.
It's interesting to me that when you think about how far away Vancouver is from Toronto, and people in each of those cities would feel like their cities are very different. Same thing, Seattle and Detroit. You found the same kind of difference between Vancouver and Seattle as you did between Toronto and Detroit. We were still, half a continent apart, and yet still very different because of the border.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what's so fascinating. The algorithm that we use to statistically distinguish between overrepresentation of a word in one country or another came out with the same results for two different border areas. And so we thought initially, well, this is really interesting, but we wanted to control for the confound that it could, be, something to do with the area in the world, Canada versus somewhere else. So we looked at a few of the border areas. So we looked at the Netherlands and Belgium, and East and West Germany, as well as the England and Scottish border. Again, nothing interesting culturally came out. It was all just linguistic phenomena, linguistic differences. This seems to be sort of very isolated to the US and Canadian side of things.
Well, it's always nice when there's data to support a national stereotype. And what's next for you guys? What's the next thing you're going to study?
We're going to move on and look at more border areas. We're planning on looking at the US and Mexican border, because that's probably very interesting to look at. We'll take it from there, I guess.
It'll be interesting to see in that study what adjectives are used on either side of the border before the word Trump. Anyway, we'll see what's in your study. Daniel Schmitka, thanks for speaking with us.
Thank you, Ian.
It is the biggest lottery jackpot in U.S. history, more than $800 million US.